They say every man has a breaking point. Mine wasn't when I lost my wife. It wasn't when my body started to ache from 68 years of building houses for other people. No, it was when my own son, my only son, raised his hand against me in the house I built for him. It was supposed to be a quiet Sunday dinner. Roast lamb, candles, the faint hum of jazz in the background. The kind of scene that should have reminded us who we were, a family. But instead, it became the night that rewrote my bloodline. Julian was pacing the dining room, veins showing on his neck, face red from something more than wine. His wife, Vanessa, stood near the fireplace, arms crossed, smirk painted on her lips. And me, I was sitting at the table, napkin folded neatly in my lap, just listening to my son, my blood, lecture me about respect. He said I was hovering too much, that I treated him like a child, that the house I gave him wasn't truly his because my shadow was always in it. His words hit harder than I expected, but the real pain came when Vanessa added, "Maybe it's time the old man learned boundaries." That's when it happened. I stood slowly and asked, "Boundaries? You think love is boundaries?" Julian's jaw clenched. He looked at me like I was the problem, like I was some intruder in his perfect little world. Then, before I could finish my next sentence, his hand came across my face. Slap. It wasn't the sound that broke me. It was the silence that followed. Vanessa didn't gasp. She didn't move. She smiled. I remember the taste of iron in my mouth, not from blood, but from swallowing every ounce of rage I had left. Because in that moment, I realized something cruel. A father's dignity can't be inherited. It must be earned. I picked up my coat, adjusted it, and without saying another word, walked toward the door. Julian shouted after me, but I didn't turn back. Vanessa laughed quietly under her breath. As I stepped into the rain, my hand trembled, not from fear, but from clarity. Some structures have to collapse before you can rebuild them right. 3 days later, that house no longer bore their names. People see walls. I see stories. Every house I've ever built has its own heartbeat, the rhythm of those who live inside it. My name is Raymond Sinclair. For 45 years, I was an architect, the kind who still drew by hand, who believed that integrity was the truest foundation. I'd built schools, libraries, homes, each with precision, each with love. And then I built one last house for my family. After my wife Eleanor passed away, I poured every memory we had into that Beacon Hill home. Every corner carried her touch. The garden she designed, the study filled with her sketches, the window seat where she used to sip her morning tea. It wasn't just a house. It was a memorial disguised as a gift, a love letter in wood and glass. Julian didn't understand that. He saw it as an asset, a stepping stone, a symbol of arrival. When I handed him the keys 2 years ago, I thought I was giving him a future. But what I really gave him was leverage. Because in my quiet attempt to give him everything, I forgot the one rule Eleanor used to repeat. Never give something sacred to someone who sees it as ordinary. I thought I was gifting my son a home. Turns out, I was signing over my dignity. When you spent your life drafting blueprints, you start to see the world in lines and clauses. So, when I set up the house under the Eleanor Sinclair Family Trust, it wasn't just sentiment. It was structure, a safeguard. Henry Archer, my lawyer 20 years, warned me, "Raymond, protection can look a lot like control. Are you sure you want it written this way?" But I didn't want control. I wanted preservation. Clause for being sure that if the property was ever misused, disrespected, or leveraged or gained without moral cause, ownership reverted to me. Henry raised an eyebrow when I signed. Someday, he said, "You'll thank this clause." I just smiled. Back then, I never imagined I'd need it. The trust became my silent witness, a cage disguised as a gift. And when Julian and Vanessa moved in, I told myself they'd honor the legacy. That Eleanor spirit would bless them as it had blessed me. But some inheritances come too soon, and some lessons not soon enough. That single clause I added in the trust would one day become my last blueprint for justice. To the outside world, Julian and Vanessa Sinclair were perfection. He, a rising financial analyst. She, a lifestyle blogger who spoke in filtered smiles. They hosted wine tastings and charity brunches, made sure every neighbor saw their new car, their new art, their new life. But behind those designer curtains, something was off. I could sense it. The air inside the house had changed. It was colder, polished, but hollow. Vanessa began complaining that I visited too often, that my old world values made her uncomfortable. Julian, my son, started echoing her tone. Then came the whispers. Beacon Hill has a way of dressing gossip in elegance. I heard the neighbors. Did you know the old man still owns a deed? Must be hard for Julian, living under his father's shadow. I'd walk through the park and hear it again. Each rumor chipped away at the foundation I'd built. Not the physical one, but the one made of pride and trust. Still, I said nothing, because silence can be the strongest wall of all, until it starts to crack. Whispers travel fast in Beacon Hill, and sometimes they ignite fires you can't put out. It was raining that night. Funny how betrayal always seems to love bad weather. I arrived unannounced, carrying a photo album I'd found, Eleanor's sketches from when Julian was a child. I thought maybe it would soften him, remind him where he came from. Instead, Vanessa opened the door and frowned. You should have called first, she said. Her tone wasn't rude. It was dismissive, the kind of tone people reserve for delivery men. Julian came down the stairs, irritated. Dad, not tonight. We're having guests. I told him it would only take a minute. I handed him the album. He didn't even look at it. Vanessa whispered something in his ear. He turned to me, voice sharp. Why can't you let go? This is my house now. Something inside me cracked, not loudly, but deeply. I looked at him and saw not my son, but a stranger wearing his face. I said softly, Your mother would have been disappointed. That's when he snapped. Words turned into shouts. And then the slap, the sound echoed off the marble. Vanessa didn't flinch. She looked satisfied. I didn't raise a hand, didn't even speak, because sometimes silence is more than fury ever could. The slap wasn't on my face. It was on every brick I ever laid for him. I drove home without turning on the wipers. The rain blurred the road, but I could see clearly for the first time in years. At the cemetery, I knelt before Eleanor's headstone. Her name glowed faintly under the streetlight, etched into marble I'd chosen myself. I failed him, I whispered. Then, after a pause, he's forgotten his foundation. When I stood, my decision was already made. The next morning, I called Henry Archer. His voice was calm but firm. You're invoking Clause 4B? Yes, I said, effective immediately. Are you sure, Ray? That'll remove him completely. I'm not removing him, I said quietly. I'm rebuilding him. By dusk, the paperwork was underway. By dawn, the transfer was complete. And by the time the rain stopped, Julian no longer owned a single inch of Beacon Hill. There was a time when every brick I laid meant something. Not for wealth, not for reputation, but for us, for Eleanor. She was the kind of woman who didn't just enter a room. She softened it, the daughter of a fisherman, raised by tides and storms. When we first met, I was an ambitious young draftsman. She was sketching the coastline behind my construction site. She told me, You build with your hands. I build with my eyes. Maybe together we can build something that lasts. And we did. We built everything from scratch. Our home, our firm, our name. The nights were long, but her laughter filled every blueprint I drew. Eleanor used to say, a house is a soul you can walk into. And maybe that's why, when she passed away, every room felt like a ghost that refused to leave. Julian was 12 when cancer took her. I remember the night before the funeral. He sat on the stairs, holding her last sketch. He asked, Dad, what'll happen to us now? And I said, We'll keep building, son. That's what your mom wanted. And we did, at least I thought we did. But somewhere along the way, Julian stopped building. He started collecting. Cars, watches, people. He built walls, not homes. Eleanor once warned me, if you give without teaching gratitude, you build palaces on sand. She was right. And now I was standing in the ruins of my own generosity. Henry Archer met me at his office, a corner suite overlooking the harbor. He was a man who spoke in sentences that always sounded like verdicts. He closed the folder with a quiet click. "It's done," he said. "You now have full authority over the property. The trust reversion clause stands." I looked out the window at the city. Cold steel and blinking lights. Once, I thought those lights symbolized progress. Now, they just looked like blinking warnings. Henry sighed. "You know, Ray, I've seen you design buildings that could survive hurricanes, but I've never seen you look this fragile." I smiled faintly. "Even steel rusts, Henry." He slid a new document toward me. "You'll need to sign to initiate the sale. I've already lined up buyers, an out-of-state couple looking for a family home." I hesitated. I could almost hear Eleanor whisper, "Are you sure?" But I'd learned something. Sometimes love must take the shape of consequence. So I signed. Henry looked at me with quiet respect. "You're doing the right thing." I nodded. "No, Henry, I'm doing the necessary thing." At dawn, the title deed was signed. By noon, Julian's empire of comfort was gone. It was mid-afternoon when Julian called. 3 missed calls. Then 4. By the 5th, I answered. "Dad," he stammered. "What the hell is going on?" "The locks. Someone changed the locks." My voice was calm. "They're not yours anymore, Julian." "What do you mean they're not mine?" he shouted. "You can't do this." "I didn't," I replied. "You did." He cursed under his breath, voice trembling. "This is insane. That's my house." "No, son, that's my wife's dream, and you turned it into a showroom." He fell silent, and in that silence, I heard something I hadn't heard from him in years: fear. Vanessa got on the line next. Her tone wasn't broken. It was sharp. "You think this makes you noble. Old man, you'll die alone, you know that? Poor and bitter." I smiled faintly, even though she couldn't see it. "I've built enough to never die poor. Vanessa, I have something you'll never afford. Peace." Click. The line went dead. By evening, news spread through Beacon Hill faster than wildfire. Neighbors whispered again, but this time, not about the old man, about the fall of the Sinclairs. Julian's friends distanced themselves. Vanessa's brand sponsors dropped her. They were the talk of the district, for all the wrong reasons. One reporter even called me for a quote. I told her only this: "I'm not punishing my son. I'm reminding him of the foundation he forgot." That night, I sat by the window of my small cottage and looked at the stars. Somewhere in that dark sky, I hoped Eleanor could see, not my revenge, but my redemption. By the next week, the media had a name for it: the architect's justice. Every local outlet picked it up. Headlines like "Father Sells Son's Mansion After Family Feud" and "Beacon Hill Betrayal." It was everywhere. I never wanted fame. But sometimes, truth doesn't ask for permission to be heard. Vanessa tried to turn it in her favor. She went online, crying on camera, painting me as a controlling, senile man who couldn't let go. And for a moment, it worked. Sympathy poured in, until Henry released a copy of the trust clause to the press. The comments flipped overnight. People started calling me the father who taught gratitude the hard way. A news crew knocked on my door 2 days later. The reporter asked, "Mr. Sinclair, do you have anything to say to your son?" I looked straight into the camera and said, "I built that house for love." Love left it first. The clip went viral. The same city that once mocked me now applauded me. But applause never fixes a broken heart. When the lights faded and the reporters left, I sat in the quiet again. The silence was heavier than before. Because justice doesn't heal, it just stops the bleeding. And in that silence, I realized my story wasn't over. Not yet. I met Henry again a month later. The sale had finalized. The funds, $3 million, sat untouched. He asked what I planned to do with it. I told him something that actually builds. And so, the Eleanor Sinclair Foundation was born, a scholarship for architecture students who'd lost parents, young dreamers with callous hands and hopeful eyes, the kind of kids Eleanor would have loved. The first time I stood at the ceremony, watching those students receive their grants, I felt something shift inside me. Not pride, not triumph, something quieter, like peace putting a hand on my shoulder and saying, "Now, you've rebuilt something worth keeping." One student, Amara, a 19-year-old from South Boston, approached me afterward. She said, "Mr. Sinclair, your wife's name will live in every brick I lay." And in that moment, I felt Eleanor's presence again, not in marble or blueprints, but in people. Maybe revenge isn't burning the house. It's lighting the next generation's lamp. I live by the water now. A small cottage in Marblehead, our first home. The one Eleanor and I built with our bare hands before we had money, before we had anything but dreams. Every morning, I sit on the porch, coffee in hand, and listen to the gulls. They sound like memory and forgiveness mixed together. On the table beside me lies a sketch Eleanor made years ago. A simple drawing of a lighthouse, standing alone against a storm. At the bottom, in her handwriting, it says, "A house stands only when those within it still bow their heads." For a long time, I didn't understand it. Now I do. Julian hasn't called since that day. But that's all right. Some structures take longer to rebuild. And I've learned not every house needs to be revisited to remain sacred. Sometimes, the best way to teach someone about foundations is to let them crumble on their own. As the sun sets, I whisper her name, Eleanor, and I swear I can almost hear her whisper back, "You've finally built something that lasts." My son slapped me in anger, but life answered in legacy. And some foundations, once rebuilt, never crack again.